Hello there, I'm Jayson Rivest, and today I want to continue our conversation about change. In last week's video, I shared with you some words of advice from my father. If there's something about your life that you don't like, change it, and if you can't change it, then change the way you think about it. Now, you may or may not have already put those words into practice, or you may have already been working towards change in your life. And so today what I want to focus on is the energetic changes taking place behind the scenes that may be manifesting in conflict in your existing relationships or situations in your life. Now, I don't want you to worry that this video is going to in any way be over your head, because I understand that most people don't think of their relationships or the situations in their life in terms of energy. So I'm going to explain exactly what I mean, but in order to do that, I'm going to need to cover a little bit of basic science, but I'm going to try to make it as accessible as possible, so just stick with me. So the example I want to use is water. We know that water can exist in a lot of different forms. We know it as a solid in the form of ice. We know it as a liquid in the form of water that we drink or water our plants with, and we know it in the form of gas, in terms of steam. Now, each of those different states are made up of the exact same molecules. It's just how they are arranged and how much space exists between them and how quickly the molecules are able to move that differentiates the state of being. So we know that in order to take ice and turn it into water and turn it into steam, we have to add energy. And of course we know that the energy that we add in that example is heat energy. So what's happening is when we add heat to the solid ice, it is going to excite those water molecules. And as those water molecules get more excited, they begin to spread out from each other. They are actually pushing away from each other because they have so much energy that they have to move more than they were moving before. And so what happens is, as this takes place, the ice is changing into a liquid state. And so those water molecules in a liquid state are moving further apart from each other, and they're able to sort of vibrate or move at a higher frequency. So when we continue to add heat, these water molecules continue to expand away from each other, and they continue to move at a higher frequency. And so what happens is they turn into a gas and they turn into steam. So in that example, we have a perfect example of vibratory frequency and how vibratory frequency can be represented as changes in the world around us. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to melt or we're going to turn into gas, but we are also made up of lots of different atoms and molecules, and we are similarly have a vibratory frequency. All of those things that make us up, they vibrate at a certain frequency. Now, the thing to think about is that our thoughts are energy. Basically, science looks at them and says, okay, our thoughts are basically just electrical impulses firing along synapses, and that's okay if that's what you want to think. And that works perfectly for our example. So when we think about certain words, or when we say certain words, they also have certain frequencies. They respond to certain frequencies. There was an example, actually a really cool example, of a scientist in Japan who took words and put them on bottles of water, and then he froze the water and took a microscope and looked at the shape of the ice crystals that formed. And even though it was all the same water, the actual words themselves had a huge impact on the actual shape of the ice crystals. And so we know that the thoughts that we think and the words that we say can have an impact on our bodies and our emotional well-being. And so basically, what's going on when we decide to make positive changes in our life, and actually even when we make negative changes, what's happening is we are actively working on changing our vibratory frequency. Now, we're not necessarily thinking about it in those terms. We're just thinking, hey, I want to eat better, or hey, I want to stop saying bad things about people, behind their back. And so what's happening is our vibratory frequency is shifting or modulating up. And becoming a little bit more refined. And I don't mean that in terms of, hoity-toity. I just mean in terms of, less dense. Less dense in terms of the earlier example of, liquid or water is less dense than ice. That's not a judgment. It's all still water. We're all still people. Now, what happens is, and I'm going to have to borrow a little bit from music here. What happens is when you get a musical chord that's played, a beautiful musical chord, it's made up of individual notes, and those notes all sort of vibrate in a harmonious way. Now, since we know that we have a vibratory frequency, I'm going to say that each one of us represents a note in a chord. And so think about the relationships in your life as a chord. And so each of the people in those relationships represent a different note in the chord. So in music, when you take, we'll say 3 notes, and they form a chord. I don't know if that's actually correct, but just go with me on it. So say there's 3 notes, and you change one of those notes, it's suddenly not the same chord. Just like if you start to change yourself, it's not the same relationships. You've automatically sort of shifted the relationship. And so what happens is the other notes or the other people in your life, they have a choice. They can either embrace the change and change themselves and form a new chord, a new harmonious chord, or they can resist the change and continue to exist in a disharmonious relationship with you. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't want a bunch of disharmony in my life. And so oftentimes what happens when we are going through those changes, when we are raising our vibratory frequency, what happens is people sort of fall out of contact with us, or sometimes in really severe cases, you might find yourself arguing with people. People that used to be your best friend may suddenly start not seeing things eye to eye. And that's okay. The reason I'm sharing this whole video with you is because I want you to understand that it isn't necessarily that they're a bad person, and it isn't necessarily that you're a bad person. What's going on is simply energetics. They're not in harmony with you anymore, and for whatever reason, the ideas that they need to embrace in order to raise their vibratory frequency, they may be afraid to do it, or they may be so foreign to them that they can't even see those ideas. And so I don't want you to ever not grow and learn and be big and expansive for yourself just to please somebody else, because that doesn't serve anybody, and certainly it serves you the least. And so what I want you to do is, embrace the lessons that that I shared with you last week from my dad about, changing things in your life, if they aren't something that you like. But I want you to be prepared for the fact that those changes may not necessarily always be the smoothest. And so by keeping in mind that what's going on behind the scenes, it can help you navigate that change a little bit smoother. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you found it useful, I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I post new videos every week on how to unlock your potential, release your fear, and tap into your hidden creativity. As always, I would love to hear from you. So if you've got feedback or questions, leave them in the comment section below. Or if you've got a topic you want me to cover, put that in the comment section below as well. In closing, I'm just going to say this. I know sometimes change can be scary, and I don't want you to shrink away from it simply because there might be some temporary disharmony in your life. Remember that playing small for others doesn't serve anybody, least of all you. Okay, now be kind to yourself and have an amazing weekend.